in a mountainous region where steep cliffs and deep valleys created dramatic landscapes, there flowed a swift river that separated two lush meadows where the finest grass grew thick and green throughout the spring and summer seasons. The river was too wide and too fast to cross safely by swimming, and too deep for most animals to wade through without risking being swept away by the powerful current that rushed down from the mountain peaks. However, many years ago, someone had placed a single log across the narrowest part of the river, creating a bridge that allowed animals to cross from one meadow to the other. This log bridge was very narrow, wide enough for only one animal at a time, and it had no railings or safety features to prevent a fall into the rushing water below. On one side of the river lived a goat named Proud Horn, who was known throughout his territory for his impressive size, his magnificent curved horns, and his stubborn, uncompromising personality. Proud Horn was a strong and capable animal, but he was also arrogant and inflexible in his thinking. On the other side of the river lived another goat named Strong Back, who was equally large, equally strong, and equally stubborn in his approach to dealing with other animals. Strong Back also believed that his physical capabilities made him superior to others and that he should never have to yield or compromise in any conflict. One sunny morning, when the grass in both meadows was particularly lush and appealing, both Proud Horn and Strong Back independently decided that this would be the perfect day to cross the river and explore the grazing opportunities on the other side. Proud Horn stepped onto his end of the log bridge and began walking steadily across, his hooves making rhythmic tapping sounds on the weathered wood. He was about halfway across when he suddenly saw Strong Back approaching from the opposite direction, also about halfway across the bridge. Both goats stopped abruptly when they saw each other, surprised by the unexpected encounter. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the narrow gap that separated them on the log bridge. The log was far too narrow for either goat to turn around safely, and there was no room for one to pass around the other. The only solutions to their predicament were for one goat to back up to his starting point and allow the other to cross first, or for both goats to back up and work out some arrangement for sharing the bridge. However, neither Proud Horn nor Strong Back was willing to consider either of these reasonable options.
Get out of my way. I was on this bridge first, and I have the right to cross before you do. Back up immediately and wait for me to finish my crossing.
You're completely wrong. I started crossing before you did, and this bridge belongs to animals from my side of the river just as much as it belongs to animals from your side. You should back up and let me cross first.
Both goats glared at each other with growing anger and frustration. Neither was willing to admit that the other might have an equal right to use the bridge, and neither was willing to show what they considered to be weakness by backing down.
I'm bigger and stronger than you are. That gives me the right to go first. Move aside immediately, or I'll force you to move.
You're not bigger than I am, and you're certainly not stronger. I've never backed down from any animal, and I'm not going to start with you.
The argument continued for several minutes, with both goats becoming increasingly angry and stubborn. Each insisted that he had the superior claim to use the bridge first, and each threatened to use force if the other didn't immediately yield. Other animals in the area began to gather on both sides of the river to watch the confrontation. Some of them called out suggestions for compromise, but both goats were too proud and too angry to listen to reasonable advice.
Why don't you both back up and decide who goes first?
One of you could lie down and let the other step over.
You could both back up to the middle and work together to turn around.
But Proud Horn and Strong Back ignored all of these sensible suggestions. They were both too focused on winning the confrontation to consider solutions that might require them to compromise or cooperate. Finally, their verbal argument escalated to physical action. Both goats lowered their heads simultaneously and charged toward each other along the narrow log bridge. The impact when they collided was tremendous. Both animals had been moving at full speed, and both had put all of their strength and weight behind their charge. The force of the collision was so great that both goats were knocked off balance and tumbled off the log bridge into the swift-flowing river below. The rushing water immediately swept both animals downstream, and although they were both strong swimmers, they had to struggle hard to reach the riverbank safely. By the time they managed to pull themselves out of the water, they were both exhausted, soaking wet, and considerably downstream from where they had started. Both goats had to spend the rest of the day walking back to their home territories, still dripping wet and feeling foolish about their stubborn behavior. Neither Proudhorn nor Strongback had succeeded in crossing to the other side of the river, and both had learned an expensive lesson about the consequences of inflexibility and pride. The other animals who had witnessed the incident talked about it for many days afterward, using it as an example of how stubbornness and unwillingness to compromise can lead to problems that hurt everyone involved. Several weeks later, Proudhorn and Strongback met again at the same bridge. This time, both goats remembered their previous experience and approached the situation very differently. When they saw each other approaching from opposite sides, they both stopped before stepping onto the bridge and called out to each other.
I'd like to cross to your side to try the grass over there.
I was hoping to cross to your side for the same reason. Would you like to go first, or shall I?
After a brief and friendly discussion, they agreed that Proudhorn would cross first, and then Strongback would cross in the opposite direction. Both goats accomplished their goals without conflict, and both enjoyed excellent grazing in their new locations. From that day forward, whenever animals met on the narrow bridge, they remembered the lesson of the two goats and always worked out polite, cooperative solutions to their crossing challenges. Cooperation and compromise are better than pride and inflexibility. When people are unwilling to work together and find mutually acceptable solutions, everyone suffers and no one achieves their goals.